wanted to avoid his son when his son asked him for a play date. So he really wanted to take this nap. He was exhausted from a long day, and he thought, to get away from this big challenge, I'm going to give my son a 1,000-piece puzzle of the world map, and I'm sure he will not figure it out. I'll be able to take my nap in peace while he tries to piece this puzzle together. 1,000 pieces. Can you imagine? Do you have any idea what strategy the son could have used to complete this puzzle? Well, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matlodi Speakwin Khatle, the founding director of Speakingdom. Speakingdom is a Pan-African leadership academy that uses public speaking as a tool to eradicate socio-economic issues. And today I have a simple question for you. What strategy do you think this boy could have used to put together a puzzle worth 1,000 pieces of the world map? I think it reflects back to the global conundrum that we have. Youth engagement for global action. But first, let me set the scene of this conundrum. So we are led by something called the Sustainable Development Goals, which is actually forecasted by the United Nations. And we know that because of these sustainable goals, the youth plays a pivotal role in the global agenda for change. This agenda is set by the UN and has been signed by all member states. The aim to create peace and prosperity for all people across the world. But does that really make any sense? Does it mean anything for you and I sitting here today? Let's bring it closer to home. For us as Africans, we have something called the African Union. Now, the African Union is a protectorate body for all 55 countries on this continent. And it's simple. They've set out something known as Agenda 2063, which is a strategic framework that outlines the aspirations for what they call the Africa we want. I can almost hear them saying, Amandla, away too, in the background. But again, does that mean anything for you and me sitting here today? I'll help you. I'll bring it even closer to home. And I'd like to bring it as close as South Africa, our very own borders of the Republic. Now, we have something known as the National Development Plan, which is actually a 500-page document that outlines how different sectors of the economy and society need to come together to eradicate poverty and emancipate us from economic slavery. 500 pages. Words. No action. Does that mean anything for you and me? Sitting here today, wondering what our role is in the global discourse for youth engagement. I think there's something very critical that we're forgetting here. There's a layer to this that we have not yet tapped into. One of the most important and pivotal layers of this global funnel that seeks to bring about change. And that layer is the individual. That layer is you. The change is not going to come from the United Nations Agenda 2030. The change is not going to come from the African Union Agenda 2063. It's definitely not going to come from the South African National Development Plan set for 2030. Instead, the change is going to come from you. The change is going to come from me. And so you're probably asking yourself, what exactly is my role in this global funnel? How do I position myself strategically to make sure that I am in line with the change that I hope to see in the world? The question that you need to ask yourself is quite simple. What role do I play in my home? What role do I play in my street, in my community, in my province, in my country? Because ultimately it's that role that will dictate my level or propensity for success. And it's that role that will ultimately help me to shape all those agendas that ultimately aim to do one thing. They all aim to help us live a decent life. And now you're probably asking yourself, so what does this mean? Kahle kahle uthini? Kwenzalang? Where do we start? 3 things. Think, aim, and push. These are the 3 things that will help you build a sustainable brand for yourself as an individual, and ultimately a brand that will help Africa, a brand that will help South Africa, and a brand that will ultimately help the world at large. Now, what do I mean by think, aim, and push? Simply put, number 1, think global, but act local. So we all heard this narrative time immemorial that charity begins at home. I'm sure we've tired ourselves listening to narratives of this nature. But really, when you act local, you realize that it's your responsibility to start where you are with exactly what you have in your immediate environment. Everyone has access to a challenge. That's the reality. There are challenges every single way where we can turn our gaze. But now the question is, are you positioning yourself to see opportunities in challenges? And I'd like to make a quick example. There's a friend of mine who at a very young age was not happy with the situation of using pit latrines in Alexandra Township. This was a big, dire problem for her. And for her to wait for the municipality to call upon government to do something about it was just not going to be enough. It was not going to cut it. And from this challenge, she then started an organization called Building Blocks. And what Building Blocks simply does is they are in the business of building toilets for the citizens of the Alexandra Township. Now, I'm sure a lot of us can think of similar, if not more drastic challenges that we face in our own communities. But the precious thing about this is to act upon it. The time is ripe for young people to rise to the occasion of leadership. It's not going to be enough anymore for us to wait upon some leadership or savior of leadership that's going to come and drag us out of our challenges. I always look back at the story of Paul in the book of Acts 9 when he had that experience at Damascus. Paul did not wait for the opportune time to start preaching the gospel, to start his missionary work and to start evangelizing. Immediately when God spoke to him, he knew that it was D-Day. We should be doing the same. We should be thinking globally, but acting locally, and realizing that we have every single thing in our disposal to be the change that we want to see. And secondly, I said we need to aim. What do I mean by that? Aim intentionally. Are we hungry for our success? Complacency is just not going to cut it anymore. Think about the Hunger Games. It's a popular American series or movie and it's got a sequel to it. People were hungry. They were in the quest for survival. How many of us are in a quest today to make it out of our current reality? And thirdly, push. Push the envelope to your greatness. It is said in the movie Lucy that we only use 10% of our mental capacity. What about the other 9%? Other 90%? We know this very well with our gadgets, our cell phones. We know very well what limit, what capacity our cell phones can go to. But do we know the same about ourselves? Do we know how hard we can push ourselves to get to that level where we ultimately tap into that which God has destined us to be? Are we tapping into the 90% in our relationships, in our finances, in our intimate relationships, in our friendships? Tap into the 90%. Do you know that by 2030, 75% of the African population will be under the age of 35? That means a plethora of young people, a plethora of opportunity, a plethora of potential. Tap into that potential. I'll bring it back to the story of the boy that we started with at the beginning. When he looked at this puzzle, it was a 1,000-piece puzzle of the world map, and he just couldn't get his mind around it. 1,000 pieces. Where do I even start? But at a quick glance, he turned one of the pieces around and he realized this looked like a feature of a face. And before he knew it, he was turning around all those pieces of the puzzle, and he realized that all these pieces contributed towards a face. It was a face of a man, a structure, something that he was used to seeing. So before he knew it, he was actually putting together pieces of the puzzle of this man's face. And he thought to himself, if I can put back this man together, then I will be able to put back the world. And that is my challenge for you. Let us build African brands and let's engage to make the globe what it needs to be. But it starts with you. Thank you.